Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar. I'll hand it over to you, Kasey. If you can unmute yourself, Kasey.
Sorry about that. It never gets old. Welcome to today's webinar. OECS presents how to handle OSHA when they come to your door or your job site and how to be prepared. My name's Kasey. We got Donna on the webinar with us. She's up in near Fargo, and we got a special guest. I'll quickly introduce ourselves. Sorry about that. My name's Kasey. I'm the regional director here in the Twin Cities. I specialize more on the construction side of things. We have about 20 associates here in the Twin Cities. I'll let Donna give her a brief introduction.
Thanks, Kasey. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I am Donna Hetland. I'm a field safety associate for OECS. I've been in the safety industry for about 20 years, and I realized quickly, just kind of being a safety coordinator, that I had a passion for this stuff. I didn't like how it made me feel when I'd go home at night and I knew that somebody got hurt. So passion for that. And then I get to couple that with my other second favorite passion, and that's teaching and education. So thank you for joining us.
Yeah. And then I got a special guest here. This is Matt Seha. He's been with OECS for almost a year now, but previously he was with Minnesota OSHA on the compliance side as a safety investigator. So he'll be a great resource for question and answers. If we don't get to your answers, we will give you Matt's email at the end. So feel free to email him with any questions that you may have.
Awesome. Well, let's get started. I just want to remind everybody before we do get into the webinar that OECS does offer continuing education credits. If you're somebody that has a safety designation and you'd like to earn additional credits, let us know after the webinar. If you just email Jennifer at oecscomply.com, she will get you what you need along the lines of continuing ed credits. Also want to remind everybody that your involvement in this webinar is going to be really important. And what I mean by that is you've got a chat option. If you've got a question that you are just burning to get answered, please go ahead and enter a chat. I will remind you, if we don't get to your chats or your questions during the webinar, we do have time at the end to answer some of those. And as well, again, you'll have Matt's, Kasey's, and my email at the end to be able to get some of those answered. We do have some play along surveys that we're going to ask your help with that just kind of gives us a better idea of who's on the webinar and what you see and maybe what you need. Also, at the end of the presentation, we're going to upload this recorded video to our website. You can find that at oecs.com under the events tab. So without further ado, I also want to remind everybody that's watching today, OECS's mission is pretty straightforward. We all pride ourselves and have a passion to come out and try to do our best to inspire strong safety cultures. And that's really just getting everybody involved. And all that means is inspiring a strong safety culture, your business runs better and your employees get to go home with all their toes and fingers at the end of the day. So let's get started.
Exactly. So, all right, here's our first survey question. Justine is going to pull up the poll, but what type of industry is your organization involved? We'd kind of like to get a gauge of who we're speaking with. Are you A, construction, B, manufacturing, C, agriculture, D, healthcare, or E, other? We'll give you about, another 5 to 10 seconds here to answer that poll. And once it looks like construction and manufacturing, which is not a surprise, as a large majority of our clients come from those industries.
Good.
All right, OSHA and their expectations, and we'll cue Matt in a lot here. What does OSHA expect when they come out to a job site? What's like the number one thing that they're kind of looking for?
They're looking to make sure that you provided a workplace free and clear of all recognized hazards to your employees. That's their main mission.
Yeah, the general duty clause,
Yep.
right? So I always tell clients it's kind of the ace in the back pocket. You have, as an employer, have to furnish a place of employment that's free of recognizable hazards that are likely to cause serious or physical harm to your employees. And so I always tell our clients, there might not be a specific standard. There's millions and millions of different situations, but it can always default back to this one clause, the cite on. Survey question number 2. If OSHA were to walk into your business right now to conduct a audit, how do you think your organization would fare? A, excellent. We know exactly what to do and we would have no issues at all. B, fair. We're not as ready as we'd like, but should come out all right, I hope. Or C, not good. We are not ready. We have lots of work to do. And that's why we are here on this webinar. It looks like the results are coming in here. We'll give you another 5 seconds. And it looks like B, fair, is roughly around 80%, which is great. Our goal at the end of this webinar is to give you a game plan to get up to that A level, to that excellent. So OSHA investigators, what are they allowed to do? Matt, let's start it off. You show up to a job site, a facility. Are you allowed to enter without delay?
Yes, within reason, the OSHA investigator should be able to get into your work site or into your workplace without unreasonable delay.
So let's say it's a holiday, the facility, job sites typically, closed. Are you able to show up on site and just enter?
No, if no work is going on or no employees are there on site, there's nobody for any hazards to be exposed to. So the OSHA investigator would just come back another day or choose a different site.
Okay. How about inspecting? What are you allowed to inspect as an OSHA investigator?
Really, they should be inspecting anywhere where employees could possibly be exposed to a hazard. So we have the list on here: structures, machines, apparatus, devices, equipment, and materials. Pretty much anywhere where an employee may be exposed to a hazard.
And then we get a lot of questions on questioning. All right, so you show up. Are you allowed to ask anyone questions? Are they allowed to have someone with them while you're asking them questions?
Yes, OSHA can ask people questions. They can refuse to answer those questions. And if the individual or the employee does choose to have somebody present, they can request that. And then union employees can have their union representative present.
Okay. Some other things that you're looking for as an OSHA investigator when you reach a facility or a job site, obviously workplace hazards, that general duty clause. Often you guys will take notes and pictures. What kind of things are you writing on in your notepads or taking pictures with?
Yeah, the biggest things that you're looking for as an OSHA investigator is to find the workplace hazards, find what hazards are present, and then employee exposure, and then prove knowledge of those hazards. Yeah, so those are the biggest things you're looking for.
You guys ask a lot of questions and take measurements. What kind of questions do you typically ask employees?
Questioning how often you're exposed, for how long you're exposed, what you're doing when you're being exposed to those potential hazards, how your task should be completed, the training that you've received, and then measurements, trying to determine severity or how close you are to something, how far fall is, stuff like that.
Yeah. I often see measurements, heights, and then even like trench depths on construction sites. So you come to a construction site, you're obviously looking for potential hazards that could cause injury. What are some of the typical ones when it's a scheduled visit on a construction site that you kind of are looking for as you're walking around?
Some of the most commonly spotted ones: fall protection, obviously very common; electrical issues, moving vehicles on a construction site, PPE being worn, those kind of ones.
And then Donna, I'll let you chime in. During your general industry clients, when OSHA shows up, what kind of things are they typically looking for?
We have a couple that are related to whatever they're seeing in the construction side of things too, but a lot of times in the general industry side, they're looking for all types of different training. Did you receive training? Did you not receive training? They're also looking for machine guarding issues in manufacturing are pretty heavy, hot and heavy right now. hazard communication, things like that. And one of the next few slides, we're going to take a look at what some of those citations look like, and that'll clue us in a little bit more what they're looking for on both sides.
Is there anything from OSHA, to add to Donna's list that you kind of look for when you walk a facility?
Yeah, machine guarding is definitely one of the biggest ones that I looked for. Forklift operations and licensing, and then HAZCOM, making sure people were in the correct PPE related to batteries and any chemicals on site.
Sure. So some other things what we kind of touched up on are obviously the standards in the 1926 on the construction side, the 1910, and then any rules that are applicable, like
Minnesota rules. Yep.
Minnesota rules, ANSI standards, NFPA, stuff like that. The general duty clause, obviously, that we just mentioned. You're kind of looking if it's a serious or other than serious violation. You talked about employee exposure. Are they exposed to the hazard? And then the proximity, the duration of exposure, the number of employees that determines possible
severity.
work conditions and employer knowledge, because that's if you as an employer know and admit that you are exposing your employees to a hazard, that could be a willful violation citation, and we'll talk about that in the coming slides.
So here we go. This is the OSHA's top 10 frequently cited standards from 2022. And I know all of us as safety professionals wait for this list to come out every single year. Shockingly, it doesn't change a whole lot. They always seem to be the same repeated heavy hitters. And what that means is there are still people that are exposed, lots of employees that might not make it home in probably any better shape than what they came in the morning. So you see kind of a long list. This is kind of a hodgepodge of could be construction, could be general industry, but make no mistake. When you're looking at things like fall protection, and you might see on this list as well, scaffolding. I've had a few of these happen on the general industry side. So just because it might be a general construction type of a standard, be on the lookout for it at your place of business as well. Hazard communication, we're going to talk about that a little bit more specifically in the next coming slides. Ladders are always on here. People are forgetting to set things up so that they're going to be set up in a safe fashion, and just recognizing if they have a damaged ladder or not. Respiratory protection, always on here. Do you have any air contaminants or anything like that at your place of business that now you need to protect employees from? There's a whole list of elements that you need to take care of if indeed you need a respiratory protection program. Scaffolding, as I said, looks like it could be a construction type of standard, but I was just at a general industry facility of mine that I've never seen a scaffold set up at all. And all of a sudden, lo and behold, here's a mobile scaffold. So keep your eye open for things like that. We're going to talk about lockout, tagout a little bit more in depth. Forklifts always make the list, whether you've done training or you've got daily forklift inspections done or not. And again, fall protection kind of hits a couple of different areas. Are you providing fall protection versus did you even train the employees to recognize the hazards? Matt's mentioned a couple of times that he's out there looking for PPE when he was a Minnesota OSHA inspector. PPE was always on the list. Are you providing eye protection? Are you making sure that employees are wearing the protection and the face protection as well? And we've all talked about machine guarding. We're going to hit on that a little bit more in depth in the next coming slides as well. I do have a couple of questions. Let me see what we've got in chat.
All right.
Under what circumstances can OSHA shut your business down?
Oh, so
there's a lot of them.
Yeah, that
is some of the most common reasons why you would shut a business down.
It would have to be some very serious health concerns, safety and health concerns that are not being addressed and being refused to be addressed. So refusal. So if you have an imminent danger, somebody's refusing to take their employees down, OSHA may red tag your site. Mostly refusing to fix hazards or get employees out of a hazard would be where you'd get shut down.
Great.
Pretty egregious and just things that you're going to want to look out for, making sure that you're taking care of those things as they pop up. So good question. Okay, so we've opened it up a little bit. Now here we go. OSHA's on site. Now what do we expect? Here we go.
Perfect.
You want to start us off?
Yeah, so Matt shows up on site in his former life here. I always tell our clients, the first thing that you want to do is ask for your credentials as an OSHA inspector. We've ran into situations where they weren't OSHA inspectors. So it's important that you check it. They will show it to you. In the state of Minnesota, they do a really good job, and they'll show it to you. And you can call the office to verify that they are an employee. You are allowed to ask them why they are there.
And they should offer that information too.
Yeah. So it's either a scheduled visit, imminent danger. What else?
Complaints,
Complaints.
or activity generated in construction. So if the building meets certain criteria, while it's under construction, they can just drop in and do a visit.
Such as like working at, heights.
Looking at heights, the size of the project, if it's greater than 5,000 square feet, if there's earth moving equipment on site, if there's a crane operating on site.
Hey, Matt, I've had a couple of people comment that OSHA had to show up because Mrs. Homeowner across the street complained about a construction site. People
Yep.
are watching out for employee safety, right?
Oh yeah, big time.
Yeah, we had 3 OSHA visits last week that I had to assist with because of pedestrian walking. Everyone's got a camera on their phone now. So all they have to do is take a picture, send it to OSHA, and if it's a fall protection hazard, they are obligated to go and attend that.
Correct. Yep.
Yep. We always tell our clients and everyone, have a contact your management, your supervisor, your safety leader. Have a team of people. Have that team, each person have their specific roles and responsibilities. Like, for example, you'll have maybe one person be your spokesperson with the OSHA investigator. You'll have one person gather training documentation, safety programs, and go through it. Do a mock exam. For example, we do safety audits, which is like a mock OSHA visit, and have a backup. If you have only one person that's going to handle a possible OSHA situation, what happens if they're on vacation, they're sick, they're no longer employed? So have a backup. And then you can ask OSHA to wait for your representative. In the state of Minnesota, they do a really great job. They know of OECS. They'll typically wait, maybe a half an hour to an hour, depending on the situation. But how often would you have waited?
It really depends on the investigator and how busy they are. It is within a reasonable time frame, and if they do choose to take it as a denial, then they would have to call their supervisor, and usually the supervisors are going to ask them to wait unless it's an unreasonable time. They're not going to wait there for 5 hours for somebody to show up.
So game plan on having someone get to them within a half an hour is pretty reasonable. So the opening conference, they are to have an opening conference as soon as they show you their, credentials. They tell you why you're there. What's an opening conference like as an OSHA investigator?
So the opening conference, as long as it's not an imminent danger, they should ask you, get all the basic information about your site. So they should present their credentials, state the purpose and scope of the inspection, discuss that they're going to take pictures and videos, and discuss that they're going to talk to employees, and then they're going to ask you for basic information. So on a construction site, how big is the project? How long has it been going on? When's anticipated completion date? Stuff like that. If it is an imminent danger, they're going to do an expedited opening conference and just kind of get the basics down, tell you what the general duty clause is, and then go and address the imminent danger, and then come back and should wrap up the opening conference.
And often, as you can see on the slide, they'll ask for records, OSHA logs, 300 logs, safety programs, maybe training documentation as well. And it's your opportunity to ask them questions too.
Well, you've had the opening conference. Now what's next? Let's talk a little bit about what that actual walkthrough looks like. So when you're taking a look at getting this walkthrough started, OSHA is going to enter. They're going to take a look a little bit around the workplace and just look to see what those hazards look like. They, as Matt and Kasey mentioned a little bit earlier, they will take your employees aside. Maybe I've seen this a few times when OSHA enters, they take your employees aside and just ask a few general questions. What are you doing? What do your tasks usually look like? How often are you doing this? Those kinds of questions. Keep in mind, you might get an OSHA investigator that is keen on industrial hygiene. And what industrial hygiene looks like is, what are those air contaminants that you have floating around? Whether it's chemical, or you have some kind of right to know issue that maybe your employees didn't realize that there's some kind of a contaminant, biological hazards or chemical. And as we've said a couple of times, and I think we mentioned it a couple more times as we go through the walkthrough here, if OSHA is taking notes, if they're taking pictures, if they're taking measurements, make sure that you know what's going on, and you should mimic that. You should mirror that. Take those notes, take those pictures, take those measurements. I've had a couple of different OSHA investigators show up. Sometimes they're a little bit on the quieter side and they're just jotting notes. They don't really tell you what's happening. You should ask. You have that right. On the other hand, I've had OSHA investigators show up to my clients, and the OSHA investigator is all about training and educating, and they're having lots of those conversations about what you should be looking for. So regardless, if they take notes or pictures or measurements, you want to be doing the same thing, because here's the deal. In the closing, in the end, after they figure out what your citations are going to look like, they're not going to share with you those notes or pictures or measurements that they took. That's going to be your backup when it comes time to going through the abatement process. And
So-
here's another, go ahead, Kasey.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna quick chime in on the interviewing employees on a construction site. What I've typically seen is they'll ask for your foreman or
Mhm.
supervisor, and then they'll ask for that new hire.
Ah.
Because they want to ask that new hire if they've had their Minnesota right to know training, which is required in Minnesota every year. The federal states is different, but in Minnesota, they like to ask that new hire. They need to have that training before they step on the job site.
Good. That's a good ad. There's lots of new hire training that needs to happen before the employees even hit the ground running. So that's always a great question. Matt, were you going to add something?
Nope. Just wanted to point out that there are safety and health investigators. They are separate, but they may do a referral. So if I was a safety investigator, if I walked through a site and I saw health hazards, you might see a health investigator show up in the next couple of days. So just
I think we talk a little bit more about this in the next coming slides. If OSHA asks you if you've ever done air sampling and the answer is no, and you have what could be potential industrial hygiene hazards in there, they're going to want to come in and take their own sample a lot of times, whether it's air or noise. They might just reschedule something later down the road and come back in and do that check themselves. So another recommendation that I would strongly make when OSHA shows up, don't tap your watch and ask how long this is going to take, because a lot of times it's going to take much longer. Matt, can you attest?
Oh no, every investigation takes however long it needs to take, depending on the hazards. So hopefully they're not going longer.
I've had our management tapping their watch and saying, geez, this is taking a long time. I have a golf date at 1. Do you think we can wrap this up? Don't do that. Yeah, just lots to look for when we're going through the walkthrough. Oh, Matt, you and I are going to kind of tag team with this and see what you think. I am going to first start out by saying, why housekeeping? And it's housekeeping and fire hazards. And here's what we look at here. If OSHA walks in, their first impression of your business is, oh my goodness, did a bomb go off in here? The investigation usually, they've got a lot to look for then, because when they take a look at what your housekeeping habits look like and it looks like a mess, and it's disorganized, you can really relate that back to looking at your OSHA 300 log and see what your injuries look like. You're sure to have lots of slips, trips, and falls, and lots of maybe different sprains and strain types of injuries, not to mention fire hazards, because you have a lot of junk hanging around. Yeah. Matt, did you see any of that kind of stuff when you're out in the sites?
Yeah, for sure. If you show up and your workplace is just a mess, you're definitely going to be expecting to have more hazards there, and just kind of looking deeper.
You know, and this kind of goes back. If you go to the OSHA manual and you're flipping tabs, is there a clear, concise tab in there that says housekeeping? Usually not.
No,
I mean, it's going to be implied.
Subjective. Yeah.
Yep. In a few different areas. And this goes right back to what you guys were talking about earlier. Housekeeping hazards can fall under the heading of the general duty status. And what that means, again, we're going to reiterate, is just that you agree to provide a safe work environment for your employees. If it's messy and nasty and disorganized, a lot of times that's not happening. Not to mention how that can change the productivity of what you're trying to accomplish with your business.
Yep. Our next example, how many times have we seen this on a construction site?
All the time.
So what would you say as an OSHA investigator in this situation with this table saw?
Well, obviously it's missing its guarding. You'd have to figure out who's using it and how often they're using it.
But they're gonna say this, I have to take the guard off to make this special angle cut. Is that all right?
Nope, now you're using the incorrect tool for the job is what OSHA
Okay.
position would be on that.
And another thing too is the table saw is one of the few pieces of equipment that you add, if it's an older model, that you might have to add a anti-kick magnetic switch to it. And so what that is if you got plugged in, the table saw is running, loses power, the power gets kicked on, the table saw shouldn't turn back on.
Okay.
And so the newer models do have these built in now, but they sometimes will check that as well.
Speaking of older models, just because a machine is very old does not mean that it has to only apply to the OSHA standards from way back then. So if you have a machine from 1950s and it has huge blades or chains, those things need to get guarded as you move into the future.
Great.
I'm going to talk a little bit more about machine guarding here, but I got a question that came up and I think it was spurred because of our housekeeping fire. As an inspector, do you look at fire extinguishers if the company is keeping up with safety? Absolutely, right?
Fire extinguishers are, definitely checked every single inspection, even on our inspections currently and at OSHA as well.
Yeah, the tag on it, right?
Yeah.
Especially on a construction site, that tag that always gets ripped off.
Yep.
You know, that every month you have to have a competent person inspect the fire extinguisher, and then you have to have enough of them within 100 foot of every worker.
Yep.
Or cover every 3,000 square foot of a construction site. So often they'll cite for not having enough.
Correct, yeah.
So Donna, you want to talk about this lovely picture?
Oh, look at this. So machine guarding, here's something that, listen up. If you're taking a break here, listen up, because the next thing I'm going to talk about with machine guarding is there's an acronym that us safety professionals use, and it's called OUTA. Yeah, like keep your hands and your body out of the machine. And what OUTA means is if an employee can reach over, under, through, or around and get in contact where these pinch points are, where just the operating, rotating, spinning parts of your machine is, that's machine guarding at its best. You got to fix it. You got to guard it, whether it's distance or a permanent guard. I told these guys yesterday that I use a picture in my training that looks a lot like this, but there's also a clump of hair in it. So you got to pay attention to hair and beards and jewelry, clothing. Is there anything loose that clothes are going to be pulled into? And just do your best here, because geez, you saw that it made the OSHA top 10 every single year. This kind of stuff is responsible for amputations, crushings, very severe, if not fatal injuries. So keep an eye on those kinds of things. Hazard communication. We talked a little bit earlier about this being, Matt looked for it when he was an OSHA inspector, and it's something definitely that we keep an eye on. You'll notice the title slide is hazard communication / right to know. This is one of those Minnesota plans as well that you have to know on your side. Hazard communication has a lot to do with just hazardous materials, hazardous substances that we talk about that might be in your facility. You really just have to do your best at training your employees before they're even going to come into contact with whatever any of these hazards are. Take a look here. I'm not so much concerned about the 55-gallon drum here, but take a look at the bucket that has acid in it. Our companies they're so good at making sure that they're labeling their containers, but I would actually take this an extra step. It might be labeled, not the best of labeling, and we're going to talk about that again in the next slide, but you want to contain this and make sure it's not going to hurt your employees.
Mm-hmm.
Under the line. So here we go. Secondary containers, that bucket that you could have just seen in the previous picture that had the acid in it, that is known as a secondary container. Did you take the product out of a main container and put it into something smaller that's usable? What OSHA is looking for here is not, you kind of evaluate your workplace. It's just not enough to actually use a magic marker anymore and just scribble it on the container. OSHA is looking for a few more things. And you remember the title of this slide this program is called Hazard Communication. Are you doing your best to communicate with the employees what's in these containers? You need a product ID, you need a signal word, you actually need a precautionary statement that tells you how to behave around these chemicals. OSHA is looking for these. falls right in line with that. If you've got hazardous chemicals and different hazardous agents at your place of business, do you also have the safety data sheet that matches that? Now, safety data sheets, we know, have to be readily accessible for your employees one way or another. They've got to be accessible for their whole work shift. So you don't want to make sure that these are locked in the safety person's office or the HR gal's office. A couple of things that I've been told now, I've met a couple of new potential OECS clients here, and what I'm told when I ask about these safety, do you have safety data sheets? Have you done a chemical inventory? And they say, oh, Donna, we have that down. All of our employees have a phone and they all know that they're supposed to go Google it. Is that okay, Matt?
No, that is not okay.
Google is not, I love that you have Google and I use Google quite often for the things that I'm looking for out of the place of business, but you are required to do your own inventory and then go find and produce all those safety data sheets that match your inventory. Whether you keep them in a binder for the employees' use or you upload them onto a computer system so that they can go find them, that's legit. If you're relying on Google, we need to talk. Oh, close, but not close enough. What do you think about this? So I also want to mention, it's not just the secondary containers, the smaller containers that we talk about, but what about your large containers? You're looking at things like drums and totes, and are they labeled? Can the employee see clearly what's in that container? But the other thing that we talk about here is, let's say you have waste at your company. Well, this looks like oil waste. You also have to label those containers, and it clearly needs to say waste oil, and it also needs to say hazardous waste in that area. I won't get too far into depth about hazardous waste, but if you've got waste at your place of business, you want to ask a few questions because there are some very tight requirements that you want to be able to match. Close, but not close enough. The next thing I want to talk about, lockout, tagout, kind of goes hand in hand with that machine guarding that we talked about. If you've got any machines on site that you are requiring employees to either do service and maintenance on, we've got to try to, how are we going to protect those employees, their hands and their bodies in general, if they are somebody that has to perform service and maintenance on any of these operating machines? So a few of the things that we look at, you see the nice lockout, tagout equipment here. This employee looks like they're doing it right. I am going to say, if you're a company that has the really pretty lockout, tagout equipment hanging on the wall and it's just collecting dust, you're not living it, you're not breathing it. And then that just means that employees can get hurt when they're working on energized machinery. There's some more specifics that we'll talk about here. If you know that you need a lockout, tagout process. So what do you need? If you've got machines on site that contain hazardous energy and you're expecting employees to go stick their hands and their body in the machine to do service and maintenance, you need kind of a plan to be able to make sure you protect them. And in this line of business, the plan is having an actual written procedure highlighting all of those lockout, tagout activities. The question has been asked before, how in depth do I have to get this lockout, tagout procedure to be written? I'm going to tell you, if you're a company that's actually just gone out to the website or out to the internet and just pulled lockout, tagout template, that's not going to be enough. So if you look at this example on the screen, this particular machine had 3 different pieces of hazardous energy that the company needed to contain: electrical, fluid pressure, and thermal. Are you considering all of those aspects of a machine and then providing some sort of lockout process with them so that employees don't tangle with the machine? You got to have the written process, the written procedure for all of your machines. You also are required to inspect these once a year. It's not enough that you have them written and then they just sit in a binder somewhere. And what I mean by inspect them is you need 2 authorized employees who know that machine. One employee is going to actually follow the written procedure and do the lockout of the machine and just authorize that nothing changed. If something did change, you need to change that procedure. Who's trained? We got to look at authorized employees. Those are the folks that are going to be actually doing the service and maintenance. You also need to train your affected employees. Affected employees just happen to be those other coworkers that happen to have to work around a machine that has a lockout, tagout procedure. And then if you've got office folks or if you got people that are touring your facility, you just want to make sure that they're going to be kept safe as well. Lots included in lockout, tagout.
Yes, definitely. So after, OSHA walks around, does their walkthrough, sees hazards such as what we just showed. Can you walk us through what a closing conference is and what kind of things that you discuss with the employer?
Yeah, so during my time, most of my closing conferences happened over the phone. They can be conducted on site if the OSHA investigator is familiar enough with the standards. They can do the closing conference on site. A lot of them happen over the phone or via Teams, and they should review the citations that are going to be proposed, and then what you need to do with those citations, a citation packet. Once you receive them, they should go over all that.
Are they going to ask you, or are you going to let them know how much it's going to cost, the proposed citations during a closing conference?
No, I don't believe the amounts would be
amounts?
discussed.
Typically not.
Yeah.
And then we get this question a lot. Donna kind of talked about earlier, the pictures that OSHA has, the notes. Are you allowed as an OSHA person to send me, the employer, the pictures, the notes?
No, those notes and photos won't be provided.
Okay.
You can possibly view those at the informal conference after.
All right. But I've had situations where I've met the investigator, you know, halfway or even at their office, they will show it to you. They just won't send it to you. You can't take a picture of their picture as well. Some other things that are included in closing conference, such as Matt touched on, is your rights as an employer, responsibilities. The penalty amounts will not typically be discussed. They'll tell you typically what a serious violation or citation can be, and we'll show you in the next couple of slides, Minnesota versus federal penalty charts and fines, what they look like.
And those won't be discussed because they may change. Their file will still go under review before it gets sent out, and those may get changed by the principals. So that's why it won't be discussed.
Perfect. This is the penalty chart amounts for the state of Minnesota. So they base it basically on good faith, your size of your company and your history, how many citations you've had, you know, dating back typically 3 years.
Yep.
Okay. And then as you can see from this chart, it's a great chart, the different amounts. A typical serious violation can, you know, go up to $7,000. A fatality, you're looking at $25,000. And then that willful. So if you as an employer knowingly are exposing your employees to a hazard, that would be considered a willful. And you're looking at about $70,000. And then a repeat. We get asked this a lot. And this is why it's really serious when you get a citation, because you are on hook for the next 3 years for a possible repeat. So let's say on a construction site, you had a fall hazard, you got cited for lack of fall protection. Well, 2 years later, same situation happens. Well, now you take that $7,000 fine and you can go up to $70,000. And you're on hook, like I said, for the next 3 years. And that goes across state borders. So let's say you're a company that does work in multiple states. You get cited for lack of fall protection in Minnesota. You have a crew down in Florida. They get cited for the same thing. Bam, you're on the hook for a repeat. Now look, this is for federal states. So if you're in the Dakotas, Wisconsin, this is your penalty chart. And as you can see from the numbers, it's double. So you take that 7,000 in Minnesota, you're looking at about 15,625. They increased it a little over $1,000 this year due to inflation, just like everything else. But look at that willful. You go from 70,000 to $156,000. I like to bring that. What's that?
Sorry, I have a question when you're set. I didn't mean to interrupt.
I'll just touch on this one last point here with this, the failure to abate. This is the one that will sometimes put companies out of business because I'll show a citation package example, but they'll give you a date to make to abate the hazard. And let's say they give you a date, you don't abate the hazard, they come by 3 months, 6 months later, you're looking at failure to abate citation, $15,000 for each day past that abatement date. So if you do the math, it's 3 months, you're looking at quite a few days. And that's the one that will put a lot of companies out of business. What's your question, Don?
So in the chat, and I wondered if this would come up. So Kasey, you showed us in that previous slide what the Minnesota OSHA citations look like. And here's the question. Do you know if Minnesota OSHA plans to update in the near future the penalties to match federal OSHA?
Yep. So I was gonna just touch on that before moving on to the off the federal side. It will be adopted in Minnesota. It's not gonna be this year or a while. It takes years for things to change, but eventually Minnesota OSHA will adopt the federal OSHA penalty chart.
They have to be at least as effective as federal OSHA. So it's coming eventually.
Can you back up a couple of slides back to that?
Sure.
That's one more back up. Okay, the next question is, can you please give some examples of A through F non-serious to serious violation classes? Like, what's the difference here in this scope that we're seeing A through F non-serious compared to a serious? What would some examples be?
Yeah, so the A through F is rated based on injury possibility. So F would be, as an example, a 50-foot fall. It's almost 100% fatal or very egregious bodily harm. So that would be F, and an A would be something like paperwork violations, stuff like that. So, and then in between there is the other ones.
Is it true that if they have electrical issues on site, are electrical always considered serious, or can that be lessened to a non-serious?
Nope, there are non-serious examples of electrical issues. If you have a GFCI protecting it, those can oftentimes be non-serious.
Okay. Good questions. Thanks for the answers.
That was a great question. So this is an example of a citation package that you might receive if you do get cited. I just want to note in the image on the right, it'll tell you the type of violation. So in this situation, it's a serious. There's that abatement date in the bottom right corner of the image on the right. You have to have it abated by. And then the proposed penalty amount. In this case, it's a little over $9,000. This is where I'm trying to advance the slide. And part of this package is going to be this page. And we always tell our clients to contest every citation. And what that process will look like, you need to fill out this box on the right correctly. So if you're an OECS client, if you ever get cited, send this to your lead associate, as you need to fill this out correctly, else it could cause some issues. So that citation package right here, you have to cite the number, and then you have to check mark each of those 4 boxes. So in this case, they only check mark 3 of the boxes. You have to check mark the citation box, the type of violation, the abatement date, and the penalty. What happens if I forget to check, the penalty amount?
So during your informal conference, they will only discuss the ones that you checked. So if you didn't check the penalty amount, they're not even going to open up the discussion to the cost for the penalty.
So we ran into situations where people just check marks the citation box, and we're not able to argue the type, the abatement date, and the penalty. So it's important that you check box those 4 boxes.
Good information.
Preparation.
Lots of information here. So how then can your team be prepared when something like this happens? Let's go. We're gonna discuss that, how your team can best be prepared, but we want you to try to help us out with survey number 3. Does your team know where your documentation is located, and are they able to provide it in a quick hurry if there is an OSHA visit? Would you answer yes, key people know exactly where it is? Or would you answer B, I think so, but I'd have to check? Or are you C, I have no idea? Give you a little bit of time here to answer. And I have
It looks like we got a majority A and B. So that's great for the A's. And those C's, we'll get you.
We'll get you there.
We'll get you there. Yep.
So good to know. I mean, I feel like people are getting better and better at this process. They've kind of heard what OSHA's after and what OSHA's looking for. And the more prepared that you can be on the front end, that's going to help your team out greatly. So let's talk about team preparation. During that walkthrough, we've given you lots of information here, but once you do start the walkthrough with the OSHA investigator, let the investigator take the lead. You follow along. And what we mean by that is you do not need to take them through every little nook and cranny, dark corner of your facility or your job site. Let them lead. They will kind of take a look around and they will navigate. They'll go talk to employees and they'll navigate towards certain machinery if they want to take a look at that. The next piece, don't only answer what's asked. Don't volunteer. And what we mean by that is be honest, answer the question, keep them short. And I don't know if any of you out there listening are like me. People get nervous, especially if there's an OSHA investigator in the house. I mean, it's kind of like having a police car behind you. I'm a good driver, but I still sweat a little bit. Keeping the answer short is going to help you with that. If you're somebody that happens to get a little bit nervous and you ramble, keep the answer short. Be honest. Don't give them your whole life story. And again, how many times have we said, if they're taking pictures, you do the same thing, measurements and notes. The last piece, why would you have outside assistance like OSHA? Well, I'm sorry, OECS. OECS has a great relationship with Minnesota OSHA as well as federal OSHA. And we know what they're looking for. We kind of know how to guide you through that and be able to help you so that you're going to be protecting your employees and offering that safe work environment that we've discussed. The best way to be prepared here is take a look back, look at your written programs. If you're a company that's attending today for the first time and you're sitting there thinking, what's a program? Those should be living, breathing documents that actually give you kind of a roadmap of what you're supposed to be doing in order to protect those employees. You really just want to make safety a part of every function, every job, and go back to what OECS's mission is. We talk heavily about, just making sure that you can have a good, solid safety background, and doing that will help you if you can include safety in every part of your program. Understand those programs and just be organized. Wherever those programs are kept, make sure that people can get in touch, whether we're talking about your management team or whoever is doing the walkthrough, make sure that they know where that paperwork is kept. Speaking of paperwork, your documentation. I think right away when Kasey and Matt started chatting about this, when OSHA comes in during that opening conference, they're going to ask you to see what your OSHA logs look like, what your OSHA 300 might entail. And what that does is if they get a good look at what that OSHA log looks like right away, that helps them know what kinds of things they're going to be looking for out on that shop floor. For example, if you have lots of different sprains and strains, slip, strips and falls, lacerations, they're going to know exactly what to ask and what to look for. Where do you keep those OSHA logs? How about training records? Do you have training records for all the training that's happening? Even if you conduct a toolbox talk or just a quick talk out on the shop floor with your employees or out at a job site, are you documenting that? Are you documenting your monthly safety committee meetings? Minnesota, you've got to match that. If you've got, I can't remember, is it 25 or more employees?
25, yep.
25 more employees, you need to run a safety committee meeting, and they require that you keep notes. You got to have agenda and notes as far as what they're looking for with those meetings. Keeping it short and simple. How about inspections? Anything, whether it's forklift, cranes, hoists, they're going to ask for all those inspection records. And the more organized with that, you're able to just say, yes, 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 here it is, and bring it out. It looks much better for you. And the investigation is going to go much better, much smoother.
I cannot stress documentation enough. On the construction site, I tell all my foremen, superintendents, PMs, when you walk around and you see hazards being, exposed to employees, you are obligated as, especially a controlling employer, to talk to them, get it fixed and document it. Like write it down in your notes, your daily notes, who you talk to, what time, and what the correction was to be. A lot of times the soups and foremen, they do walk around, but they do not write it down. If it's not on paper or on a computer, in OSHA's eyes, it never happened. So
document the good and bad in that situation. If you walk around and you see good people wearing fall protection, people wearing PPE, write that down too. That can help you for sure.
Definitely.
We've got a couple of questions in chat. Is there a required frequency for safety committee meetings? I've had that come up every once in a while. Minnesota says periodic, but it's recommended that you're doing those regularly, monthly. Most of my companies are doing it monthly to keep that conversation going and keep those items fresh. What do you recommend?
Monthly is usually what they would like to see, but yeah, as you said, it's kind of vague. So
Quarterly, it's good that you're having them if you're having them quarterly or every other, but it just doesn't give the safety committee the momentum sometimes that they need. So the more, the better. The last one, I've got another one. How long should we keep the inspection records? That depends. That's my favorite word, right?
yeah, daily inspections, you could even keep those on like a dry erase board that goes away at the end of each day. And so you do your inspection, you write it down, and then you do the next one the next day. It really depends when you would need to see those inspections, like how they may apply.
I always recommend, if possible, for the life of the project. So you have that documentation.
Longer is better for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, for sure.
Longer is better. You need that track record to show that you have been doing them consistently, really.
Yeah.
Well, good question.
So looks like we got the example of a 300 form here.
So we've talked about the OSHA 300 form a few times here today. So please make sure when you're looking at this is the 300. This is your record of what your injuries look like at your organization. And now I'm going to recommend that this stay as up to date as possible. If you had an injury last month, it better be on this log. The reason that I say that is I've had several companies, even companies that I've worked for, that wait until December to fill this out. That you're opening yourself up for citation if you don't have this filled out and up to date. So the OSHA 300 form is required. OSHA form 300A is the summary of all of that on that previous form we just looked at. The OSHA 300A form is what gets posted every single year in a conspicuous place for your employees to see from February 1st until the end of April. And each location is required to have one of these. So again, you're just making sure you're doing the best in posting that. I don't think we talk the next section. You're also required, depending on what your organization does and 20 or more employees, you're also required to go onto OSHA.gov and report the same information. So just making sure that you are up to date with your record keeping.
And construction sites need this posted in their job trailer if they've been there for more than 1 year.
Yep. And remember to post the 300A and not the 300, because you could run into HIPAA violations. So have a plan. Who's going to be on that team that I discussed earlier? Who's going to get notified? Who's going to participate? Who's going to be your spokesperson when OSHA shows up? Who's going to compile that documents? Who's going to organize it all? Who's going to talk and answer correctly? It looks bad when OSHA asks the representative a bunch of questions about safety programs or hazards or training, and the person says, I don't know. So have someone that knows the answers. I put this together. OSHA has quick cards, such as for heat stress and cold stress. I made one for when OSHA's comes at your door, because in this hour here, there's a lot of information. So this is a great little form here that you could print, put in on your computer, email Jennifer from the early, or myself or Matt, and we'll get you a copy of this if you want a little, quick reminders of what to do and what, not to do. And that leads us to our last survey question. After going through all this information about OSHA, does your organization need assistance? A, yes, we need further help and guidance. B, no, we're all set. Or C, I don't know. Maybe we'd be open to having us, OECS, evaluate your situation. We'll give you a couple more seconds here.
I have a question in chat when we're through with the survey.
Survey is pretty unanimous. It looks like a lot of people are set, which is great. If the people that answered C, we're here to help. We'll give you our information. Please contact us. What's your question, Donna?
Question in chat is, as a general contractor, we fill out our safety audit forms that note safety violations for subcontractors to fix. However, we do not impose penalties or fines. If the subcontractor does not fix what you have asked, can we argue that we are not willing to fine or fire due to the lack of labor out there. If we fine or fire due to safety, they will just move on to their next home builder. So basically, what can you do with subcontractors and who's responsible with that?
Well, your AWARE program should have laid out on what your penalties are, enforcement for your safety policies, and you do have to follow through with those related to safety violations.
And OSHA does keep the general contractor, whether, you know, you got subcontractors under you, OSHA does keep the general contractor.
Yep.
And
They can
I
both
like
be
to-
held responsible.
I like to reiterate that, you know, especially in Minnesota, the multi-employer citation. So if your subcontractor's not performing safely, they're exposed to hazards, OSHA can cite them and cite you, the GC, the CM, the controlling entity as well, based on your subcontractor.
Yep.
So it's important to stay on top of your subcontractors. I'd just like to bring up here, you know, here at OECS, I like to bring up the fact that, yes, if you're in the cities or in the surrounding suburbs, we can get to your job site in 30 minutes if OSHA were to show up. I always get asked questions, what if I'm in a rural area? There, you know, you're not close to any of our offices. We are able to jump on Microsoft Teams to join you and assist you when OSHA shows up. We are able to jump on the camera, interact, you know, ask questions. So don't feel like I'm not by one of your offices. You guys can't help me with OSHA situations. We definitely can.
So we're going to get this wrapped up for you. We just want to remind everybody about the OECS safety solution. We can help with just about everything safety. And this encompasses, if you've got questions about your insurance items, we can help you work through your EMR, your experience modification rating, and try to help you make that better. We can assist with OSHA visits. You keep in mind that we can help with any of your industrial hygiene, air sampling, any of your noise sampling. We do have the total safety solution for you. So please reach out if it's something that you think that OECS can help you with. Before we do the poll, let's see, keep in mind, if we did not get to your chat questions, we do have access to your email, and so that we can answer any of those chat questions that we weren't able to get to today. Let's go ahead with the final poll. How would you score the webinar? Would you give us a 3? Good info, very helpful. Would you give us a 2? Some takeaways. Or would you give us a 1? Did we totally miss the mark? These final polls really help us to just make the webinars better for you and make sure that we cover what you're looking for. Couple seconds.
Perfect.
Good.
Lots of threes, so that's good.
Good.
You did
Good. I like that. Thank you for the feedback. We're going to wrap up. Again, you've got all of our contact information. Kasey, Matt, and myself, we are reachable by cell, by email. Reach out, please. The last piece that we want to tell you about, you guys have anything final words?
No, contact Matt if he's got a wealth of OSHA experience. He's always willing to answer questions and get you pointed in the right direction.
Good. So we're going to wrap up by letting everybody know about our next webinar that's scheduled for Thursday, May 18th at 11 a.m. Please join our very own Connie as she goes through mental health first aid. It's going to be a good one, so please make sure that you schedule it. Some chats coming through, but we will get back into touch with you. Thank you so much for everybody for taking time and joining us today. Kasey, Matt.
Thank you.
Thanks
for joining. Have a great day. Hopefully stay dry or avoid the snow.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
This concludes today's webinar. Have yourself a wonderful afternoon.